Amina was 24, living in the bustling city of Lagos. The heat was heavy, pressing down on her shoulders as she made her way to work each morning. She worked as a clerk in a small logistics firm, tucked away in a cramped office building where ceiling fans buzzed lazily, barely keeping the sweat at bay. Her salary was hardly enough, just enough to cover rent for the tiny one-room apartment she shared with her younger brother, plus food and transportation. Nothing more. Every morning, Amina woke before the sun rose. She boiled water in an old kettle for tea, sliced bread sparingly, and packed a few beans in a small plastic container. She never bought lunch. Her salary couldn't allow luxuries like eating out. Her life was a cycle of work, bills, and silent prayers that things would someday get better. Her co-workers often gossiped, laughed, and compared phone brands while she sat quietly at her desk, focused on the ledger books and the endless flow of invoices. Amina didn't mind. She had no time for vanity. She was there to work, to survive, and to give her brother a better chance at education. He was studying hard, and she was determined that he wouldn't live the same life she did. But beneath her silence was a heart full of dreams. She longed to be more than a clerk, more than a number on a payroll. She wanted to study business, maybe even open her own logistics company someday. Yet every time she glanced at her wallet, those dreams seemed far away like clouds out of reach. Still, she walked to work with dignity, greeting the street vendors, sometimes giving a smile to beggars even when she had nothing to offer. She believed that kindness was a form of wealth, and in that she was rich. What she didn't know was that one simple act of kindness, on a day that started like all others, would alter the course of her life forever. The sun blazed that morning, the city already awake with honking cars, rushing pedestrians, and the cries of market women selling fruits. Amina, as usual, had left early. She liked to avoid being late. Her boss, though never around much, was a stickler for punctuality when he did show up. As she neared the main road, she saw an old woman standing at the edge of the street. She was frail, hunched, her wrapper tied loosely around her thin frame. Cars zoomed past recklessly, and the woman stood frozen, her hands trembling, clutching a small bag. People passed her without pause, too caught up in their own lives. Some muttered impatiently, annoyed that she was blocking the way. Amina slowed her steps, her heart tightening at the sight. She could not ignore her. "Ma," Amina said softly, touching her elbow. "Do you want to cross?" The old woman looked up, relief flooding her wrinkled face. "Yes, my child, but my eyes are not good. I can't see the cars well. I've been standing here so long." Amina glanced at the traffic. The cars didn't care, zooming by as if the world belonged to them alone. She sighed, knowing she might be late for work, but kindness called louder than any clock. "Don't worry," she said firmly. "Hold my hand. I'll take you across." Carefully, she raised her hand to stop a taxi and gestured to the oncoming vehicles. Surprisingly, they slowed just enough. Holding the old woman gently, she guided her across the wide road, step by step, shielding her from the rush of motorcycles and buses. When they reached the other side, the woman squeezed Amina's hand with surprising strength. "God bless you, my daughter," she whispered, her eyes shining. Amina smiled, brushing the dust from her skirt. "It's nothing, Ma. Take care." But what Amina didn't notice was the sleek black SUV, parked just meters away. Inside sat a man with sharp eyes, watching her with quiet curiosity. He was not an ordinary man, he was one of the richest men in the city, and he had just witnessed the simple act that would draw his attention to her life. In the SUV, Michael Adeyemi adjusted his cufflinks and leaned back against the leather seat. He was in his early 40s, tall, well-built, and dressed in an immaculate navy blue suit. Known as one of the most successful CEOs in Africa, He owned Adeyemi Holdings, a billion-dollar conglomerate spanning logistics, real estate, and tech. He was feared in the boardroom, admired in the press, and envied by competitors. But wealth came with loneliness. Michael lived in a world where every smile toward him carried calculation, every handshake carried expectation. He rarely saw genuine acts of kindness. Everything was a transaction. That morning, while waiting for his driver to navigate through traffic, he had witnessed something unusual. A young woman stopping her own rush, risking lateness, to help an old woman cross the road. No cameras, no applause, just sincerity. "Who is she?" Michael asked his driver, still watching Amina disappear into the crowd. The driver glanced. "Sir, just one of the workers around this area, I think. Many people pass here." Michael nodded, but didn't reply. Something about her demeanor, the humility, the way she smiled at the old woman stuck in his mind. He had seen hundreds of employees, thousands of job seekers, but rarely such pure humanity. As the SUV pulled away, Michael made a mental note. He was due to visit one of his subsidiary offices that day, the very office where Amina worked. He hadn't planned on paying much attention to anyone, but now curiosity had planted a seed. Meanwhile, Amina rushed to her desk, a little out of breath, but on time. She didn't know that her life had just brushed against the orbit of a billionaire. At the logistics firm, whispers ran like electricity through the air. Word spread quickly. The CEO himself was coming. It was rare employees could count on one hand the times they'd seen Michael Adeyemi in person. Some polished their shoes nervously. Others adjusted ties and blouses, pretending to be busy. Amina sat at her corner desk, quietly entering figures into the ledger, her pen scratching steadily across the page. When the black SUV finally pulled up outside, the building seemed to hold its breath. Michael stepped out, tall and commanding, his aura demanding respect without a word. He moved through the office with his assistants, inspecting, nodding, asking questions that made managers sweat. And then, as if by chance, his eyes fell on her. Amina. The same girl he had seen that morning. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. Her head was bent over the numbers, brows furrowed in concentration. A strand of her braided hair had slipped loose, and she tucked it behind her ear absently. Michael paused, surprising his entourage. "You?" he said, his voice calm yet sharp. Amina's head snapped up, her heart thudding. Everyone in the room froze, eyes darting to her in disbelief. "Yes, sir?" she said softly, standing quickly. "What's your name?" "Amina. Amina Yusuf, sir." He studied her a moment longer, then simply nodded. "Carry on." The CEO moved on, but the damage was done. The entire office buzzed like bees once he left. Why had he singled her out? Why her name? Amina sat back down, flustered, feeling 100 eyes burning into her. She didn't know whether to be proud or afraid. All she knew was that her quiet life had just taken a strange turn. The days that followed were heavy with speculation. Co-workers whispered behind her back. Some accused her of having secret ties with the boss. Others sneered, assuming she must have done something to catch his attention. "Amina, so you know the ogre?" one of them teased during lunch. "I don't," she replied firmly, but her denial only fueled gossip. Deep inside, Amina felt uneasy. She had always preferred to remain invisible, unnoticed. Attention from a billionaire CEO was the last thing she needed. She worried it might even cost her job. What if management suspected her of something improper? Meanwhile, Michael couldn't shake the image of her from his mind. It wasn't attraction, at least not at first. It was curiosity. He had seen countless employees grovel for his notice, but she hadn't sought it at all. She had looked startled, even uncomfortable. That, in his world of power-hungry opportunists, was unusual. One evening, Sitting in his expansive office overlooking the city lights, he replayed the scene of her helping the old woman. He remembered her smile, unpracticed, genuine. It stirred something buried deep, something he hadn't felt in years. Perhaps, he thought, this girl was different. It was a week later when fate brought them together again. Michael was visiting a construction site owned by his company when he noticed a small food kiosk nearby. Workers gathered there for cheap meals, rice, beans, fried plantain. To his surprise, he saw Amina seated there, eating quietly from her plastic lunchbox. She hadn't noticed him. She sat on a wooden bench, spooning food carefully, lost in thought. Her clothes were plain, her sandals worn, yet she carried herself with a quiet dignity. Michael approached, ignoring the shocked stares of workers who couldn't believe their billionaire boss was heading toward a roadside food stall. "Miss Yusuf," he said. Amina jolted, nearly dropping her spoon. She stood immediately. "Sir, I didn't see you." "Relax," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "May I sit?" She hesitated, then nodded quickly, moving aside. He sat beside her, his tailored suit looking entirely out of place among the plastic tables and smoky grills. For a moment, neither spoke. "You don't eat with your colleagues?" he asked finally. She shook her head. "I bring food from home. It's cheaper." Michael nodded slowly. He respected her honesty. Many in her position would have tried to impress him, pretend to be wealthier than they were. She didn't. "You work hard," he said. "I've been watching." Amina swallowed nervously. "Thank you, sir. I just do my best." He studied her quietly, then said something that made her heart skip. "One, Amina's life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. The new logistics startup entrusted to her was small compared to the empire of Adeyemi Holdings, but for her it was monumental. Every day she poured her energy into it, hiring a handful of young people who, like her, only needed a chance, negotiating contracts with wary suppliers, and designing a system where efficiency was balanced with fairness. For the first time, she wasn't just working for survival, she was building. Michael watched her progress quietly. At first, he had doubted whether she could shoulder such a responsibility, but soon those doubts vanished. She carried herself with a blend of humility and authority, the kind that earned her team's loyalty. He would often find himself reading her reports late at night, smiling unconsciously at the careful notes she added in the margins. Something about her handwriting, even, spoke of sincerity. Yet, it wasn't just admiration he felt anymore. Somewhere along the way, admiration had deepened into something softer, something more dangerous affection. He found himself thinking of her, not just as his employee, but as a woman whose spirit lit corners of his life he hadn't realized were dark. One evening, after a long strategy meeting, he invited her to step out onto the glass-walled balcony of the headquarters. The city stretched endlessly before them, glittering with neon lights and restless traffic. The hum of Lagos at night was alive, horns blaring, vendors calling, motorcycles weaving through crowded streets. But up there, the chaos felt distant, almost unreal. "Amina," Michael said, after a long silence, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "Do you ever wonder why our paths crossed the way they did?" She glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes," she admitted, "maybe it was just God's way of reminding us that kindness matters, that even small acts can ripple far." Michael's lips curved faintly. "Perhaps, but I think it was more than that." The weight of his gaze lingered, and Amina felt her heartbeat quicken. She wasn't naive, she sensed the unspoken layers in his words, yet she also knew the world would never forgive easily. She was a poor girl from the streets, and he was a billionaire. Their lives were separated by oceans of class, expectation, and rumor. Still, in that quiet moment above the city, those barriers seemed less solid. Michael reached out, not as a CEO demanding respect, but as a man daring to be vulnerable. His hand brushed hers gently, waiting. She froze, unsure, her breath caught in her throat. Part of her wanted to step back, to protect herself from the storm such closeness could unleash. But another part, the part that believed in the mysterious pull of fate, remained still. "Fate may have begun this," he whispered, his voice low, almost trembling. "But choice will decide the rest." Amina's eyes glistened, reflecting the city lights below. She didn't pull away. Somewhere deep inside, she understood. The road she had once crossed to help a helpless stranger had led her here, to another crossing, one not of streets, but of hearts.